it matters. And we have future generations that are depending on us. And when I look at what's going on, I'm like, Lord, what do I tell people to do? Or what do I tell them to think about? Or how do I tell them to approach these problems? Because again, you can easily feel helpless, but I want you to pay attention without feeling overwhelmed. And that does mean, unlike, my dad, I laugh at him, and I always joke with him. He's always paying attention to the news. He has news in his earbuds. He has news on his iPad. He has news on his laptop, and he has news playing in the background on the TV. And I'm like, Daddy, it's overkill. You might get overwhelmed so much so that you feel depressed. You feel despondent. You feel like, what is the world coming to? What is America coming to? And I get that feeling. But I don't want you to look away so much so that the people who do not have the best intention of the American people, in my opinion, gain the advantage. When folks decide not to participate in the system, and that's what they want. And again, let me just express that all the views on the Suzette Speaks program are those of the host, only me, yours truly, and not that of this radio station or its owners or management, right? These are my personal views. And you can choose, like I said, to have yours. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm trying to give you food for thought. So when you go around in the world, and like I said, when we think about this thing called democracy, this really interesting experiment where in the United States, we are not necessarily as homogeneous. We are not as homogeneous in terms of culture, subculture, even language, as some would presume from the looks of other countries, where people tend to have in other countries major ethnic groups, major religion. We are the melting pot. We were the place where people came, some involuntarily, yes, due to what I call the European slave trade. I don't call it transatlantic because the Atlantic didn't enslave anybody, right? It was folks from Europe who came through and decided to use human beings as property from which they gained ultimate value and built a country like the United States, the strongest economic country in the world at present. Well, it became that way because of, unfortunately, that original, sin of our country. And when we are hearing from an administration that wants to cleanse, I'm paraphrasing, our national history museums, places like the Smithsonian, from telling the truth about the history of our country. And our country's history is not always beautiful and bright, but there are so many powerful lessons to learn from that history. And pretending it didn't happen and pretending it doesn't exist is not the American way. So we're going to continue to speak truth to power on the Suzette Speaks show. We're going to continue to speak truth to power within the platforms across our talk shows. Most of the time during the midday, during the week, I have my colleagues, former mayor of Broward County, Dale Holness, earlier in the week, around this time, around lunchtime. Do tune in, guys, because especially as we get into, it seems like it's always political season based on what is happening in Texas. I could talk about that. The lawmakers that went back to Texas and now have given the state legislature a quorum, meaning there were no votes that could have taken place in Texas to recreate unfair maps that shrank the influence of predominantly Black and brown constituencies. They have now passed in one of the houses because the Democrats decided to go back. Why did the Democrats decide to go back? I need to play the audio because I did see a press conference maybe 2 days ago from some of the Democrats who decided to go back, explaining why they decided to go back. Because I thought to myself, if you're going to make a stand, why not keep yourself out of the state so that there is not this opportunity for the Republican-led Texas state legislature to complete their mission, which was given to them, as reported, that the president of the United States said to them, we need 4 or 5 more seats. So please make sure you redraw in the middle of a cycle. Remember, the districts in each state that go to the maps that go to the United States Congress are redrawn every 10 years when the census is taken. The United States takes account of all people within its borders every 10 years, right? 2010, 2020, 2020, coming up 2030. But we are in the middle of 2025. And there are states now that are looking to redraw districts. Why are they doing that, Suzette? Well, thank you for asking. Because the map that is drawn now will influence who controls the United States Congress in 2026. There are going to be elections again. It's not a presidential election year, but 2026 is a huge year because of the elections that will take place for people who will be elected to Congress. Those are the representatives that represent you and represent me in Washington, D.C. The Congress is made up of the United States Senate, which has 100 people, 2 from each state, 100 members, and the United States House of Representatives, which is 435 members in equally measured districts, depending on population. So when we talk about redrawing maps and people saying, what is this word, gerrymandering? You'll hear it a lot. Redrawing districts to give unfair advantage to political parties who probably are out of control, meaning they don't possess the control of that district. So they want to redraw it so they do control the district. So you're a Republican, there's a 2, 4, 6 strong Democratic districts. Let's just redraw it and draw those predominantly black districts into majority white districts. So, oh, well, they'll never have influence in that district again. It'll become a Republican-led district by adding the black people in such a diluted number that they will never elect another person of color to represent them. That is the idea. Redrawing political boundaries to give oneself an advantage. That is gerrymandering. Well, we're hearing about it in Texas. There are proposals right now. Did you know there are proposals to do the same in Florida? We already lost a predominantly black seat in North Florida. We've already lost one. And we're hearing murmurs of that also. So what do we do? Well, I told you, there's so many things going on. I narrow it down as best as I can. There are a couple things I want to highlight. Now, of course, I've been talking about what's going on in Washington, D.C., and the militarized takeover of the nation's capital. Of course, Washington, D.C., as I explained last week in a little bit more detail, is not a state. It doesn't have the same rights. It's a district, and it's administered by the national government, right? There's a Home Rule Act that was passed in the 70s that allows for some, changes where the residents of Washington, D.C. can elect a mayor, they can elect a council, but Congress and even the president have a lot of control and influence over Washington, D.C. So we saw President Trump last week exercise that control, sending National Guard troops. Now, what is the National Guard? Remember, the National Guard is basically the governor's army. Every state has a National Guard. But sent in members of the National Guard from several Republican states to go and so-called patrol the D.C. streets for crime. That's what them say. So them say is what my mom would say. But when we looked at crime statistics in detail last week, we realized crime was actually on a 30-year low in Washington, D.C. Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise. And what it perhaps is actually doing is creating a more volatile situation for the residents. People, they're saying crime is down. They're saying people are not going to eat. They're not going to restaurants at night. Not because they feel unsafe. It's because they feel unsafe because there are militarized people patrolling the streets. If you caught at the wrong place at the wrong time, what is it going to be for you? And there's so much going on. I really want to highlight this one issue, and I'm going to talk about more in depth when we get back on the other side of the break. But President Trump, in the press conference that he sat down and gave with President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, in the middle of that press conference, would have been covering what is going on between Ukraine and Russia. Mr. Trump made a statement. I'm going to have to play a little bit as we come back from break because I want you to hear it directly. There are millions of people across this country that vote by mail. Millions. And when I looked at the statement, and I'm going to read a little bit from a report that came out 2 days ago, a news report from NPR, the National Public Radio platform. Trump wants to stop states from voting by mail and using voter machines. Do you hear this story? We're not just going to sweep it under the rug. We got to pay attention to it. Because what Mr. Trump said during the press conference with Volodymyr Zelensky, and then when he backed it up on his social media platform, President Trump announced on Monday on his social media site that he plans to, quote, lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots and voting machines. Did you see this? He wants to get rid of mail-in ballots. Think about all the people across this nation that use mail-in ballots, Republicans and Democrats and independents. Our elderly, people who work and can't go on voting day or can't go during early voting, people with physical disabilities, etc. The President of the United States made a statement on his social media, and we're going to go into it and dig a little deeper on the other side of the break, where he's discussing on his social media platform, as I stated, via this article from NPR, published a couple days ago. He wants to, quote, lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots and voting machines in the country ahead of next year's, what did I call it? The election next year is called the midterms, because they're midway between the next presidential election. So halfway every 2 years, every 4 years you elect a president, but in between you have what's called the midterm elections, where it's focused on the members of Congress. Part of his plan, he wrote, includes signing an executive order. Now, we're going to talk about whether he actually has the legal authority. But listen, that has been challenged over and over again just because it doesn't exist. Now, his plan, as I was saying, according to NPR article, includes signing an executive order that would bar states from using mail-in ballots and potentially some voting machines. He said, without evidence, this is the key, that the voting machines are, quote, highly inaccurate, as well as more expensive than watermarked paper ballot. He wants to take it back to paper. Interesting, yeah? Most U.S. voters already vote using paper ballots. And research has consistently found hand counting ballots to be less accurate and more expensive than using the machine tabulators. Trump, whose long spread baseless claims, according to NPR, about the security of mail-in ballots, also falsely claimed that the U.S. is the only country using mail-in ballots. They use all over the world. That's false. According to Mr. Trump's statement, we're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt, Trump said later during a meeting, as I told you, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House. He added, and it's time that Republicans get tough and stop it because the Democrats want it. It's the only way they get elected. Now listen, both Republicans and Democrats and independents use mail-in ballots quite frequently. I was looking up for the numbers in Florida, across California, all over. Now, this is crazy because although Mr. Trump himself urged his supporters to use mail-in ballots prior to the 2024 election, it's interesting that Democrats do have they are more likely to vote using mail-in ballots compared to Republicans since the 2020 election. The gap has gotten wider in recent elections as GOP-led states have passed more restrictions on the method by which you vote. Now, voting has been the purview or under the control of the states for a reason. Voting rules are made locally. I tell people in Florida, we have 67 counties. It's like 67 little kingdoms when it comes to the supervisor of elections and the rules that are made. But we're going to get more into it after the break. What do you think? Do you think Mr. Trump, A, has the authority, and B, should he eliminate vote by mail and the use of voting machines? This is what he says he wants to do. You can call me up, 850-446-0562. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in the nitty gritty. I also want to share some events I got going on, man. I'm going to be busy the next couple of months. I got about 10 events right now I'll be hosting. I'm really excited about that. I want to tell you about a few of them on the other side of the break so that you can come along and, enjoy, hang out with your girl, enjoy the sights and sounds, do good work, raise money for good causes. I'll be hosting a 5K. I am so excited about this 5K. I can't wait to tell you about it because it's for a good cause. Ladies who have lost their hair due to illness. Anyway, got to take a quick pause for the cause. Don't go anywhere. Keep it locked. More Suzette Speaks Show right after this.
The Voice of the Caribbean. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok, and YouTube.
Let Broward County Transit take you to the summer fun and experience the natural beauty of South Florida. Enjoy sunset views from your paddleboard and explore one of the many Broward County parks. Simply catch a ride with Broward
Shout
County
out
Transit.
to everybody listening. Hope you're having a great day. Oh my word. I was trying to get a better camera angle, but they playing games. They got the camera all up in my face. I can't even. Ooh, child. All right, shout out to everybody watching. I am going to log back in and make this a separate second stream. Say hello and please hit the like button. Shout out to everybody. Thank you.